यशोदनन्दन व्रज जनरञ्जन यमुनतीरावनचारी जयो राधमाधव कुञ्जविहारी जय गोपीजनवल्लभ गिरिवरधारी यशोदनन्दन व्रज जनरञ्जन यमुनतीरावनचारी हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे जयो कृष्ण बलराम कृष्ण बलराम जयो वृंदावन धाम जयो राधेश्याम ललित विशाख जयो राधेश्याम जय गौरनिताय जय गौरनिताय जय जय प्रभुपाद जय जय प्रभुपाद Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Ashtotara Sat Shri Srimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Ashtotara Sat Shri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Srila Gaura Kishodas Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Srila Sachidananda Bhaktivinoda Thakur Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Vaishnava Sarabhama Srila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Shri Rupa Sanatana Bhatta Raghunatha Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Raghunatha Sad Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopi Gopika Shamakun Radhakun Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Shri Mayapur Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Gangamayi Yamunamayi Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Tulsi Devi Ki Jai. Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. ISKCON Vartamana Guru Vrinda Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Gaura Premanande Hari Hari. All glories to assembled devotees. All glories to assembled devotees. All glories to assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Today we are reading from chapter 13 entitled Nature, the Enjoyer and Consciousness, 15th verse. Sarvendriya-guṇābhāsaṁ sarvendriya-vivarjitam asaktam sarva-bhṛc nirguṇam guṇa-bhoktṛ sarvendriya-guṇābhāsaṁ sarvendriya-vivarjitam asaktam sarva-bhṛc nirguṇa-bhoktṛ sarvendriya-guṇābhāsaṁ sarvendriya-vivarjitam asaktam sarva-bhṛc nirguṇam guṇa-bhoktṛ. Word to word meaning: sarva, of all, indriya, senses, guṇa, of the qualities, ābhāsam, the original source, sarva, all, indriya, senses, vivarjitam, being without, asaktam, without attachment, sarva-bhṛt, the maintainer of everyone. Cha, also. Eva, certainly. Nirguṇam, without material qualities. Guṇa-bhoktṛ, master of the gunas. Cha, also. Translation purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. The Supersoul is the original source of all senses, yet He is without senses. He is unattached, although He is the maintainer of all living beings. He transcends the modes of nature, and at the same time He is the master of all the modes of material nature. Purport. The Supreme Lord, although the source of all senses of the living entities, does not have material senses like they have. Actually, the individual souls have spiritual senses, but in conditional life they are covered with the material elements, and therefore the sense activities are exhibited through matter. The Supreme Lord's senses are not so covered. His senses are transcendental and are therefore called nirguṇa. Guṇa means the material modes, but His senses are without material covering. It should be understood that His senses are not exactly like ours. Although He is the source of all our sensory activities, He has His transcendental senses which are uncontaminated. This is very nicely explained in the Shveteshvara Upanishad 3.19 in the verse Apanipado Javano Grahita. The Supreme Personality of Godhead has no hands which are materially contaminated, but He has hands and accepts whatever sacrifice is offered to Him. And this is the distinction between the conditioned soul and the Supersoul. He has no material eyes, but He has eyes, otherwise how could He see? He sees everything, past, present and future. He lives within the heart of the living being, and He knows what we have done in the past, what we are doing now, and what is awaiting us in the future. This is also confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita. He knows everything, but no one knows Him. It is said that the Supreme Lord has no legs like us, but He can travel throughout the space because He has spiritual legs. In other words, the Lord is not impersonal. He has His eyes, legs, hands, and everything else. And because we are part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, we also have these things. But His hands, legs, eyes, and senses are not contaminated by material nature. Bhagavad Gita also confirms that when the Lord appears, He appears by His internal potency. He is not contaminated by the material nature because He is the Lord of the material nature. In the Vedic literature, we find that His whole embodiment is spiritual. He has His eternal form called Satchidananda Vigraha. He is full of opulence. He is the proprietor of wealth and owner of all energy. He is the most intelligent and is full of knowledge. These are some of the symptoms of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is the maintainer of all living entities and the witness of all activity. As far as we can understand from the Vedic literature, the Supreme Lord is always transcendental. Although we do not see His head, face, hands, or legs, He has them. When we are elevated to the transcendental situation, we can see the Lord's form. Due to materially contaminated senses, we cannot see His form. Therefore, the impersonalists who are still materially affected cannot understand the personality of Godhead. Om Ajnanatirmirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Jayo Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Before we go into today's discussion of this verse, I seek blessings from you all so that I can speak for my own purification and also for the pleasure of assembled Vaishnavas and for the pleasure of Guru and Srila Prabhupada. And consciousness. We will see the breakdown of this chapter. It has 5 sections. The first section is up to 1 to the 7 verses. It talks about Kshetra and Kshetragya. And 8 to the 12 verses which is 5 verses together, it talks about the process of knowledge. 13 to 19, which is the current section, is talking about the object of knowledge, which is Gayam. 20 to 26 is about Prakriti, Purusham and their union. And 27 to 35, developing Jnana Chakshushu, the vision of knowledge. So in the beginning of the chapter, we have seen Arjuna asked 6 different questions. So what is Prakriti? What is material nature? Who is the Purusha, the enjoyer? What is Kshetra, the field of activities? Who is Kshetragya, the owner of the field? What is Jnanam, what is the knowledge? And what is Gayam, the object of knowledge? And Krishna explains the Kshetra is the body, and Kshetragyam is the living entity as well as the Supersoul. And what is knowledge? Knowledge means understanding there is a separate existence between the Lord, the Jiva and the Prakriti, although they are all together. And Gayam is understanding this is the object of knowledge. That means understanding the individual soul and Paramatma. And Paramatma, who is Paramatma? He is the expansion and representation of the Krishna. Now in this verse, Krishna is explaining about Paramatma, and he is explaining some qualities of Paramatma. What are some qualities? Sarvendriya-guṇābhāsaṁ, sarvendriya-vivarjitam. So he is the origin of all the senses and the qualities, but at the same time, he has no senses or he has no qualities. So, and asaktaṁ sarva-bhṛc caiva. So he is the maintainer of all the living entities, but at the same time he doesn't have any attachment. And he is nirguṇam, he has no material qualities, guṇa-bhoktṛ, but he is the master of the gunas. So it is a lot of contradictions. Prabhupada says these contradictions to be understood in the light of the knowledge. When we have the right knowledge, then only we will be able to understand these contradictions. A similar verse is also explained in Ishopanishad, Mantra 5. Tad ye jati, tad nai jati, tad dure, tad vak antike, tadantar asya sarvasya, tad tu sarvasya bhayata. So, what does this shloka is telling? That the Lord, he walks, but he doesn't walk. He is far away, but he is also very nearby. He is in everything, but again he is outside everything. So how do we understand? So these are the Lord's transcendental activities, and they're performed by his inconceivable potencies. He can walk, so it's very illogic that you will say that, someone can walk, but at the same time you're claiming that they cannot walk. So this is something that we cannot put in our material conception and understand, but we have to understand from the eyes of the Shastra. So because we have limited understanding, we put everything in our perception. That's why it is very difficult for us to understand, and that's why we simply reject, saying that the Lord doesn't have form, Lord doesn't have senses, because it's easy to reject rather than to understand the contradictions. And this is what the impersonalists do, because they don't have this faith in the Shastra, in the faith in the authority given by the Lord. They simply reject, saying that, they say, Krishna himself is saying he's nirguna, so he has no qualities. Krishna himself is saying that, he's guṇa-bhoktṛ. So, no, vivarjita, he doesn't have any senses or the qualities. So why should I accept? He already declared it, right? But they wouldn't see how the Lord is presenting both the sides of this coin. So, but the devotees of the Lord, they understand the Lord very clearly. So, he is within, but at the same time he is externally presented. So he is present in each and every atom of this world, in the material universe. But at the same time, he is outside also. He is existing as a Govinda. He is existing as Krishna. He is existing as Gopal. So he is never losing his personality because he is existing outside. So now this morning in the Prabhupada's reading, Prabhupada was mentioning how Krishna can use his energy. Both material and spiritual, both are his energies. But if we use that energy in relation to Krishna, it is spiritual. But if we don't, the same Subhadra becomes Abhadra. It becomes troublesome. It becomes the obstacle in our devotional service. So, although the Lord here says that he is without senses, he is without the material senses. But he can use the material things to manifest himself. Can someone think of an example how he manifests in the material forms? Anyone? Can you think of an example how the Lord uses material things to manifest himself? Yes, Krishna Balaram, in the form of the Acha Vigraha. The Acha Vigraha, it is the deity made up of material things. The Lord is engraved on the stone or wood or earth. But the Lord personally comes and manifests. So if we go to Krishna Balaram or Radha Shyam Sundar or Gauranitai, they actually reciprocate, right? So this is very inconceivable for a non-devotee. But for a devotee, they can understand because they are performing devotional service. So that's why the impersonalists are not able to understand the Lord, because the Lord is not in the three dimensions. Few weeks ago, His Holiness Swayam Bhagavan Keshava Maharaj, in his morning class, he was describing how Krishna is Turiya. Turiya means one who is on the fourth dimension. So he's the fourth dimension because he doesn't belong onto the three dimensions of this world. He's beyond the length, breadth and depth of this universe. He's beyond the three modes of material nature because he's always on the Vishuddha Sattva. He's not under mode of ignorance, passion or goodness. And he's also the Lord of the three Purusha incarnations. Mahavishnu, Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, Kshirodakshaya Vishnu. And he is the Sarva Karana Karanam. He is the source of all of them. And Krishna is also Turiya because he is above the three states of consciousness that usually we experience. That is deep sleep, dreaming state and wakeful state. Because he is always completely transcendental and he is on the transcendental. And Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur also mentions that Krishna is Turiya because he is above the three states, three platforms. He is above the physical, mental and intellectual. And Krishna is also beyond the three worlds, middle, upper and lower planetary systems. That's why he is known as Tribhuvanat. So why is it some people cannot understand that the Lord is beyond this? Krishna himself says in the 9th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, 11th verse, Avijananti ma muda manusham tan ashritam param bhava agnato mama bhuta maheshwara. Fools derive the Lord even though when the Lord descends himself in the human form. And because they don't understand the transcendental nature of the Supreme Lord and how he is the proprietor of everything. What is an example? We see many soldiers have gathered on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. How many of them actually recognize the Lord as the Supreme Personality of Godhead? Only few recognize Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Some just thought that, okay, he has some supernatural powers. And some, they just denied that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Why? Because they have a very deeper attraction. What Krishna says in 9:12. Mogasya moga karmanam moga gnana vijatete rakshasyam asuram caiva prakritim mohinim shritaham. Because they're deluded by Maya, they're attracted to material nature, either to the karmic activities or mental speculations. And because of that, because they have taken shelter of the illusionary energy, instead of taking shelter of Krishna, they have taken shelter of the illusionary energy. So one may ask a question, isn't it the illusionary energy is also the Lord's energy? So what is the problem of taking shelter of the illusionary energy? In the beginning of the creation, when Brahma was creating the material world, he created 5 features of ignorance in this material world. And that's why illusionary energy is very, very dangerous. Why? What are the 5 features? The first one is tama. That means darkness of self-knowledge or self-deception. One becomes ignorant of this identity as they are the part and parcel of the Lord. And the second feature is illusionary bodily concept, moham. And because of that illusionary bodily concept, one forgets the Lord. And the third feature is mahamoham. It pushes one to gain over false proprietorship of the enjoyable objects. And then the living entity, the conditioned soul, becomes possessive of the things. And the fourth is tamishra, anger upon frustration. We wanted something and we don't get it and we become very angry. And this is because when our enjoyment is obstructed, we are much more deluded. Because we want to be the controller, we want to be the proprietor, but it's not happening. And then that produces a lot of confusion and disturbance, and it pushes us into more ignorance. And the fifth is andatamishra. It is an unconscious state that brought by the anger. It's basically the sense of death. At the time of death, the conditioned soul doesn't know what is happening to him, where is he going, what is the purpose of his life. That's why Krishna is telling, don't take shelter of my illusionary energy, but take shelter of me. So, and this is also because we cannot appreciate the Lord, how the Lord is bhoktṛaṁ yajna tapasam, sarvaloka maheshwaram. And this is because we are envious that the Lord is the Lord of the entire material creation. And He is a beneficiary of all the sacrifices performed. And He is the actual friend of all the living entities. And this is nothing but the envy. Now, envy can also be manifested in the 3 modes of material nature. Envy in the mode of goodness. Someone may be thinking that, I will open charitable organizations, I will open hospitals, I will help this person. And then what is the inner feeling? That he's thinking that I am the provider, I am the supplier, and I am the one who is taking care of them. I am the friend of these poor people. Then in the mode of passion, what happens? The living entity becomes so mad and he becomes very greedy after things. And he doesn't care about his constitutional position. He doesn't care about his own welfare. Rather, he runs after the material things so madly. And anything that comes in his way, he will try to eliminate from his path. And mode of ignorance, the envy is manifested, it is simply but destruction of oneself and others. So this is the deadliest disease that the conditioned soul has, the envy for the Lord. That's why they cannot understand if the Lord is presented with so many contradictions. Because they want to lord over the material nature and they want to enjoy and they want to be the proprietor. Now karmis utilize their resources to lord over the material energy. Whereas the mental speculators, the jnanis, the people who fall under the category of the jnanis, they try to merge into the Lord. So both are very harmful for the conditioned soul. But again we go back to 9th chapter, 13th and 14th shloka. Krishna talks about a contradictory of the people, the mentality of people who are in devotional service compared to the asuras. He says that they are not deluded. They are never deluded, but indeed they are protected by my internal energy. They are protected by his internal potency. Why? Because they are always engaged in chanting, satatam kirtayanto mam. They are always engaged in chanting, hearing about the glories of the Lord. And they are endeavoring with determination. And they are always bowing down to me. And then they perpetually are worshipping me. And because of this, they are engaged in, they are protected by the internal potency. Here in this purport, Prabhupada also explains that, the conditioned soul also has the spiritual energy, spiritual senses, but they're covered over. They're covered over because it is in the conditioned state. But someone comes to the devotional service, they can experience the same spiritual senses as the Lord, but they never become the Lord, but they understand that my relationship as the part and parcel of the Lord. And the Lord knows everything, whatever is happening. In the past, what we have done, what is going on now, and what will happen. It is said how the living entity and the Supersoul, the Lord, is like two birds sitting in the tree. One bird is eating the fruits and the other bird is witnessing. This is the Supersoul. He's always there, he's maintaining, he's taking care of us. Senses. But his senses are not material, but they're transcendental. And there are many, when we study the Shastras, then we understand how the Lord is exhibiting these transcendental senses. When Krishna appeared before Devaki and Vasudeva as a little baby, he manifested the four-hand form, right? So how many babies they're born and they manifest four-hand form? No one. But still we don't want to accept Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Krishna lifts the Govardhan hill with a pinky finger. But we can't even lift a ball, but still we don't accept him as the Supreme Personality of Godhead because we are envious of the Lord. Or Krishna performs the most inconceivable pastimes, but still we don't want to accept. But Prabhupada says that we have to engage in devotional service so that we can understand the Lord. The only way to understand that the Lord is full of contradictions, yet he carries his own personality only by devotional service. What happens when someone engages in devotional service? They desire to lord over this material nature and unify with the Lord becomes nullified. But someone can raise a question saying that, devotees also work like karmis. They go to jobs, they earn money. And we also do philosophical research about learning the Lord. Isn't it same like the karmis and the jnanis? Prabhupada says no. Because although a devotee is working as a karmi, he is going to work to earn money, but his internal intention is to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And as a devotee, we are doing philosophical research, we are studying the Shastra, we are going deeper, we wanted to understand how the Lord is in full of these contradictions. But this is again to attain his lotus feet. It is said that we have to know the greatness and the sweetness of the Lord. Knowing the greatness of the Lord helps us to appreciate how the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the maintainer, sustainer, and annihilator. And knowing the sweetness, we can build up a personal relationship with the Lord. That's why it's both ways. We have to know the Shastra. And what is in the Shastra, we have to be understanding in depth. Because in one sense, why do we need to know about this jnana section of this Bhagavad Gita, like especially about the last 6 chapters? Because it's all talking about the nature, the living entity, how it is caught up in the material nature, the workings of the Supersoul, and how do we get out of this material world. Why do we need to know? We just need to love the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. But without understanding the jnana section, we cannot appreciate how the Lord is working with so many inconceivable potencies, but he's not interested in any of those, but he's interested simply in our loving devotional service. Krishna says, Patram pushpam phalam toyam yema bhaktya prayachati. You just offer me a fruit, leaf, flower, water, anything, but with love and devotion I will accept. And how is he accepting? He's accepting personally, with his senses. Like we see that in the, when we make some bhoga, when we offer to the Lord, the taste of the bhoga changes. I mean, as a new devotee, I was trying, like to make recipes to offering to the Lord and without offering to the Lord. It's the same ingredients, but they never tasted the same. It's not that I am a pure devotee, I was just a beginner, but still. But this process of devotional service is pratyakshāvagamanam. It's directly perceived. Whenever we engage in devotional service, the results can be obtained. The results will be obtained. This is the promise of Krishna. And this is very easy to perform. Susukam kattavyam. Very easy to execute the devotional service. And also, Krishna on the Suddha Sattva. Lord Shiva is telling to Sati after the insult of Daksha. Sati is asking, weren't you not disturbed by my father's insult? Then Lord Shiva is saying, Sattvam visuddham vasudeva saptitam yadiyate tatra pumanapavritam satves chatasman bhagavan vasudevo yadakshaje me namasa vidiyate. Lord Shiva is saying, I'm always engaged in offering obeisances to Lord Vasudeva in pure consciousness. Krishna consciousness is always pure consciousness in which the Supreme Personality of Godhead known as Vasudeva is revealed without any covering. So Lord Shiva is telling that, I'm always engaged in devotional service. I'm always meditating on Krishna. So I'm always connected to Him. And because I'm in that pure connection with the Lord is revealed to me. And I have this deeper connection, that's why anything material is not affecting me. Just like something, Prabhupada often quotes this example of putting the iron rod in the fire. Iron rod is nothing to do with the fire. It's two different, constitutionally there are two different elements. One is a metal and one is fire. But when you put the iron rod in the fire, after some time the iron rod catches the fire and becomes red hot and it can burn like fire. So anyone who is engaged in devotional service, what happens to them? They are raised to this Suddha Sattva, this higher consciousness, spiritual consciousness. And this is where the Lord Himself reveals. And to know the Lord, we need to execute devotional service. And this state of existence is Suddha Sattva. So, if we want to come to the state of Visuddha Sattva or Vasudeva state where we can perceive and understand how the Lord is present, then we have to execute unadulterated service without any motivations for fruity work or for mental speculation, and also following the rules and regulations of the sadhana bhakti, because this itself will propel us to go to the higher stages of our devotional service. And when our senses, although they're material, they cannot understand Krishna. They have nothing to do with something spiritual. But because they're engaged in the pure devotional service, Krishna, He's revealed to us. Rishikesha Rishikena Sevanam Bhakti Ruchyate. Krishna helps because He is the Lord of the senses. So Lord Chaitanya also says how devotional service cleanses the mirror of the heart, the mirror of the mind. So if the mirror is clean, we can see our face very clearly. So similarly, if we can clean our heart with chanting the holy names of the Lord, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So what happens, our hearts get cleansed and we will be able to get in touch with the Lord. In the second canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Prabhupada writes that if someone chants very sincerely, they can come in touch with the Supersoul. So what does it mean by coming in touch with the Supersoul? They get the direction from the Supersoul how to execute in the future of their devotional service. Krishna gives this knowledge from within. Tesham satata yukthanam. From within, he gives this inspiration for us to carry forward in our devotional service, that we can be progressive. And Lord Shiva is also saying that, since my heart is filled with this conception of the Vasudev, Supreme Personality of Godhead, he is present in my mind and heart. I'm always offering obeisances to the Supreme Lord. So that's why I'm complete. I'm not disturbed by Daksha. So Prabhupada says that the real thing is bhakti. Bhaktya mam abhijananti. Only by performing devotional service, we can understand all the contradictions of what the Lord, how he is working with his inconceivable potencies. Also, I was thinking of an example from my own life. In 2016, I went to do a yoga teacher training course in Mysore. So as a part of the course, we have to attend the yoga philosophy class. And this particular person was a Bhagavad Gita reader for last 20 years. He knows from front to back. Anywhere you can quote him a shloka, he'll tell the entire shloka. Yet, he was explaining how the final destination is to merge. I was sitting in the class. Anyways, I already prepared in my mind that, I'm not going to this school to preach to anyone. I'm going there only to learn yoga. I'm not there to preach or make anyone devotees, because it doesn't work in the schools. So anyways, I was sitting in the front row, and he was telling that for 5 times or 6 times he was shouting that we have to merge, we have to merge. I don't know, I couldn't stop myself, and I was like, but Krishna says, right, he's sitting in our heart and he's directing us. Then what do you speak about it? Then he asked me, so do you follow Advaitavad? And I don't know what it meant that time. What is Advaitavad? I don't know, I follow ISKCON. And then he was trying to defeat me that, how finally our main goal is to merge. And Krishna himself is nirguṇa. He has no qualities or no things. And it's finally for us to merge. And I couldn't present any arguments because I wasn't very strong, even now though. But in my heart, I really felt very grateful that I came to Srila Prabhupada's shelter, to ISKCON, to read Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam under the authorized devotees. Because out there, outside ISKCON or outside a bona fide sampradaya, people have very mixed notions. There are 600 editions of Bhagavad Gitas available today in the world. But none of the Bhagavad Gitas can actually present the Lord as a person. They always describe him as impersonal. But Krishna here is saying the Supersoul is the original source of all senses. Yet he's without the senses. He's declaring the Supersoul is with the senses, yet he's without the senses. So I was very grateful, thinking that, how, although I'm very new devotee, how much I am protected. This person is reading Bhagavad Gita for 20 years, but he couldn't get the idea of who Krishna is. 20 years is not a small thing. It's a lot of investment of time and energy to know the shlokas. But, so we should be very grateful that, how Srila Prabhupada is protecting us through this moment. And how Prabhupada is always presenting Krishna as who he is, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he never compromised. So we stop here and see if there are any questions or corrections or comments. Please. Thank you. No questions? Okay, then we close. Thank you so much. Please forgive me for my shortcomings. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.